My name is Lucy Moore, and I'm doing a 2.5-month studio residency at PICA, and I've come over from London to do that. And I'm working on some films and projection pieces which are made in response to basically to two things. One is this wind farm in Albany, which I visited just before beginning the residency. So I've already made 2 films which are sort of using that footage, and then I'm now making a digital projection piece which is about the salt lakes on Rottnest Island. Yeah. Well, I wanted to be lots of things, and originally I was studying physics at university, and I wanted to be a particle physicist, which I still think would be amazing, but I think I just realised that maybe I wasn't clever enough to do that. And no, in the end I decided that I wanted to do art, but I was already at university studying physics at the time, so I ended up doing architecture and history of art for 3 years, and then I did a second undergraduate degree in painting, and then the master's. So yeah, so I've done a lot of studying actually, but it's really all the architecture and history of art really fed into what I do now as well. So I'm glad that I did those too. I think maybe they're not so far away. To an extent, scientists have to be creative as well and imaginative. Like you have to, as a scientist, you have to be sort of open to different ways of thinking about the results of an experiment, for example. So maybe they're not so far apart. I guess in a more literal sense, I do look at sort of unusual, naturally occurring phenomena quite often. So things like strange light effects, or my interest in the wind farm is also to do with what our relationship is to energy and power and landscape, and so perhaps it does come through quite clearly also. I think definitely you really feel the weather here a lot more. You know where the wind's coming from, and and then obviously over the last couple of months there've been sort of quite significant environmental intrusions into kind of Queensland, and a cyclone here, I think, up just north at the moment, and so there's that, but then also I think people here are generally just much more kind of connected to nature in a way that I'm not, and so I have an almost like a sort of almost romantic relationship with it in some sense, because it's quite alien to me. Which is interesting. London's a much bigger city, but it's also much more connected to other, to Europe and even to the east coast of America. But then, of course, Perth is sort of relatively close to Asia and also the east coast of Australia. And it's not to say it's not connected, but it's just a different sort of relationship with other artistic communities, I guess. And then I definitely think that in London, perhaps there's more sort of interesting culture from the public, just because maybe the weather is a lot worse. And here there's a real culture of sport and outdoor activity, which I love, and I don't think the two are. I think the two can coexist really well. I suppose one thing I like about Perth is that because it is maybe relatively a bit calmer, it gives you space to really focus on what you're making, and I think that's really great. And it's also like quite easy to get things done because it's relatively small and it's quite immediate, and which is brilliant. You know, in London, everyone's competing for space and money and, you know, press and all this stuff. And so here it's nice that it's very easy to do things as well. Yeah. I think it definitely helps for artists to have a kind of support structure that's maybe like studio buildings or like a place like PICA, or even a sort of engaged group of journalists or something, like, so that there's a sort of discursive atmosphere that you know, that will help an artist formulate their ideas and then be able to express them clearly, you know, and I think that is really important. Yeah, I think also sort of organisations like I think there's this new place, Ben, opening up soon, and studio complexes, you know, like that if there are support structures in place there to kind of engage with business, for example, and also media, that I think that could be really helpful, and probably is really helpful as well. You know, like we'll definitely here at PICA, you know, there is a really productive kind of group of people here, and that's great. Yeah. I think it's hard for artists to, for anyone artistic to sort of function on their own. You know, like it is like quite a social thing as well as something that maybe you do on your own in a room every day. But yeah. So one of the ways I've been thinking about how I engaged with this trip to Rottnest, for example, was through my memory and my kind of accumulated like cultural knowledge and experience. And so the thing that I'm working on at the moment is this projection is kind of articulating those earlier experiences, which have in a sense structured my approach to that place. And that's just one example of, I think, what happens every day with everybody, you know, and that I am really interested in is that there can be a sort of multiplicity of interpretations of the same event that are sort of based on memory and previous experience, and I suppose I don't really think necessarily that I think the past kind of intrudes into the present quite often, you know. They're not necessarily that distinct. So that's my interest in memory, is that it's a very, it's like a very imaginative thing, really, memory. It's not like your memories are never perfect, kind of repetitions of these past experiences. I think you kind of construct them in the same way that maybe you construct art, or you construct your interpretations of things in the present. So that's why I'm really interested in it, almost as a kind of parallel to art making, or understanding things. I use like SLR cameras and digital cameras, and also have a Lomo, which has got a great fisheye lens, and I've always been into it, but I guess over the last 3 years or so, I've used it more and more. I think obviously it has a very close relationship with memory, because that's a huge part of the way that we construct them, is through images. And I don't really favour one or the other. I quite like using them all sort of interchangeably, and sometimes I re-photograph photographs, so so I like there being a real fluidity in using lots of different kind of cameras, basically. And I like slides. I've done a lot of work with slides. Particularly, I like the way that you can actually kind of physically hold them and manipulate them and then project them, and that's so it's almost more like a material, or it's an image that has this kind of real materiality connected to it. I'm preparing for the open studio night here at PICA, which is going to be on the 22nd of March. and it will be a chance to see the studios and the work made of all three resident artists. We've been here for about 3 months, and PICA is on James Street in Northbridge, just near the State Library and the State Gallery.